I love a good dashboard. The dashboards at the end of the day, what the purpose that they were ultimately meant to serve was to answer users' questions, right? So a user has a question, then they go to the dashboard, use the dashboard to get the answer. We're saying now, just ask your question directly, and then you get the answer, and then you can follow up in conversation and say, okay, now I want to dive into this particular element of the results you gave me. Or, oh, I'd like you to explain how you got that answer.
Hey everyone, this is my friend Steven from Simplyput.ai. He talked about his journey leaving his cushy tech job and founding, where he goes through multiple pivots, fails in his first hack, and he's actually about to give up, and he ultimately stumbles into the idea, which is now Simplyput.ai. He also addresses a lot of industry-wide concerns of, being an AI company that basically, Sam Altman has made very clear that there's going to be a camp of companies that get wiped out because of, they're betting against AGI innovation versus companies that are kind of riding the wave. And he talks about how his company, simply put, has positioned themselves to ride the wave of innovation. He also addresses how he's benefiting from larger context windows and a really cool customer story where they made an externally facing a product, and they're using Guardrails for it. And it's a very, very neat agentic application. As someone that runs an AI consultancy myself, I can tell you that a lot of the problems that he's addressing come up time and time again for various companies in various industries. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Hey, Steve, thanks for, joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, AJ.
Cool, man. Yeah, I know we've talked about this throughout the years several times. Good to hear it again now that you've had, a lot of success, you've had a lot of failure. Yeah, help me understand like what your journey through entrepreneurship was like even before Simply Put. When did you decide to make that leap and you felt like it was right? And ultimately, how'd you come up with Simply Put?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I've been kind of a career chameleon of sorts. And I started off as a physics PhD student and in astrophysics in particular, and I wrote a research paper and really loved physics, but just decided that I wasn't ultimately going to pursue the professorial track. So decided to drop out. And I think the term is mastering out. I got my master's.
Heard that one before.
Um, and so then I jumped into management consulting actually for 2 years. And that was a great business introduction for me. But then I wanted to find something that was between academia and management consulting, and that's when I found data science. And you and I did a similar data science boot camp right when that whole trend was starting,
Yeah, that
and
was fun.
yeah, that led me to Atlassian, where I was data science analytics manager for 6 years, and really enjoyed. It was great actually growing up in Atlassian. I joined when they were pre-IPO and was really able to see them grow significantly. And I used a lot of the lessons that I learned from there and a lot of the things I observed and um, so many good practices and things that I observed there in my current role as well. After 6 years, the company had done, I had a little money saved up and I said, I've always wanted to try to do my own thing. Right. And I think I felt that itch. I know you felt that itch before. So was very excited to go out and start my own thing. And
Cash considerations and job prospect considerations. Am I going to be able to find another job again? And do you ever have those doubts? How did you resolve those? Or
I definitely had those doubts. And I think it's very scary to make the leap because I was doing well, both financially and in the organization. And after a number of years, you've gained some respect in the organization. And it is hard to leave that behind and go off on your own, I would say. Definitely.
what
So
you're doing well because of the data science boom and your position within Atlassian.
yeah, exactly. And I was a known quantity. It's a trusted quantity. That kind of political capital can get you very far and keep you around. But I did want to just explore something on my own. It was a big decision for me. I remember being very scared my last day at Atlassian, saying, okay, now I'm really on my own. And again, I'd saved up some money for this purpose. At the time I was single,
So
and
you
it
always knew. It was always in the back of your mind.
was always the back of my mind. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, the first thing I started was something that was a consumer based, basically email masker, and had ambitions there, but it really never took off. It's hard to do.
How'd
It's
you come
really
up
hard
with
to do.
that idea?
I had always been interested in the privacy and identity space to a degree. I can be a very private person to some degree. And it was around the time people were very concerned about the proliferation of their information all over the internet. So my ultimate goal was to make a way where your sign up flow was essentially masked, and we could be the kind of gatekeepers of your identity, so that you didn't feel like you were giving out your identity all over the internet, because eventually that's all pieced together in a certain way. So I was very interested in that idea, pursued that for a bit, and it was ended up being a pretty good lifestyle business, but not something that was going to take off in a huge way. So decided to retire it, and was
Sunset it,
about
as
to
they
go.
say.
Sunset is the term. Sunset it, and was about to go back into the real world, as I say. And that's actually when I was on the way back from a wedding. I was driving back from a wedding, and my current co-founder of Simply Put, Tony, who was a data engineer that I met at data engineering at Atlassian, and then he was at Slack. And he was at Slack at the time. And Tony has always has some really creative ideas. And one that we kicked around a few times ourselves, and that he was bringing back up, was a way for people to self-serve their own data questions. So he was at Slack, and he was in the midst of this problem once again. And he said, there's got to be a way for people to, business users who are not necessarily as data literate, to go in and just to answer questions as simple as, how many customers did I get last month, to get the answer. So what ended up happening was, I said, I had just heard about GPT-3 coming out, and we put together, this may be the time to pursue something like this, right? So this was over 2 years ago now. We got together and we did our research into the AI space as things were coming up, and found GPT-3, and even spoke with the OpenAI team and understood where this was going. That was our
You
bet.
spoke with the OpenAI team.
Yeah, back then
You had a
we were
bunch of
really,
access. Yeah, because
yeah,
you,
we
you
were
were
really
what
suspended
back then. It
users.
was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. You guys were like the one of the earliest people, one of the initial pioneers, into the space, right? So I bet you had special access. But hey, before we move on to that, and I love where we're going with this. What were the learnings from the first startup, right? I'm sure that it sounds like you had your go at it, and just as you're about to like hang up the cleats and go find a regular desk job, you had this other epiphany that came up. But before we get into that, what were like the learnings from that, and how do they benefit you now, and your second act, as Simply Put?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things I learned was, I took my time a little bit building before even talking to customers or talking to potential customers. And in this case, they would have been potential users. But one of the things that I learned was, do a lot of research up front when you're starting a new thing, to understand the landscape, to understand the technologies that exist, and to understand what users really need, right? That's the biggest thing. So before you build, start to understand what folks need. And then just iterating very quickly based on that feedback was something that I'd heard for, but I realized, especially when you are an early startup, that's your biggest asset, right? How agile you can be and nimble you could be to take in
That's right.
anecdotes from customers, from users, and to quickly build features that they need, sunset features that no longer are needed, but just moving very fast. And so that was something that I really took away from the first venture. Was I was probably being a little too casual. And that's why I turned into a lifestyle business to some degree. This, I really wanted to get out there and talk to people and get our name out, and to understand what people really wanted. even before
So
starting.
there was like a reassessment period, and then your co-founder came to you with this idea, and this is someone that you had worked with at Atlassian, and you trusted him and whatnot. And just as I guess you were ready to hang him up, and this idea just sounded so appealing or compelling that you were just like, this makes perfect sense. By the way, I was hoping that you would say that it was that one time at the bar when we met at during the pandemic, and I had said something and it sparked something in your. I was hoping it was that, but okay, sounds much more sensible.
Well, it was. So it was funny because I was on my way back from a wedding, driving with my wife, my now wife, girlfriend at the time, and she was driving. And yeah, we were actually talking about my next move. And it was just one of these things where Tony called out of the blue. And again, I had putting things together. This was finally the time when this is possible. We could talk about what Simply Put is a little bit more, but that it's with these things, always it's timing, right?
Okay.
So you try to understand if the timing is right as well. And we felt the timing is right to do this. Something people have been trying to do for a long time is
Was
to
this
assemble data.
2020 or? So,
Yeah, so this is 2021. Yeah.
okay, and sorry I interrupted. You said something that people have been trying to do has been asking a lot of questions to the data.
People have been trying to allow people to ask natural language questions about data for a long, long time, in many different contexts, whether it's structured data, non-structured data. And now's the time is the way we feel about it, especially with the way that AI has evolved, both the third party AI and also the open source. So we're very excited.
Gotcha. So now at that, when you guys realized that there was a major matchup with a huge problem and a solution, was I think you mentioned it earlier, GPT had was in its early form, LLMs were in its early form. So were you using traditional NLP techniques to call like things like TF, IDF, like more probabilistic models, and so forth? Like what kind of was the evolution to LLMs, unless you just jumped straight into it?
Yeah, so we considered all of it. We really did. We considered building our own small LLM at the time. We definitely used more traditional vector-based methods as well, but we thought our bet was, and you always got to make bets at a certain point. Our bet was that this was going to turn into something where we were best suited at the time, using our intimate knowledge about data and the questions that get asked at companies about data, was to build a data product around the AI and to ride the revolution, if you will, the AI as it got better and better. And that's still our thesis today. And we're using a lot of third party LLMs. We're also exploring open source all the time. And open source solutions are getting to the point where they are on par with third party LLMs in some cases. Um, and so, but our biggest thing is to build a data product around the AI and to kind of ride that.
I see. Okay. This kind of segues on to the next question. And yeah, as you mentioned, you had earlier, you had a first mover advantage that early on, and you had a lot of
Mm.
exposure to the folks that were making these LLMs. So what goes into the pudding, if you will. You definitely had access to that. And so now you got a good periphery. And you're saying that open source now in some cases is on par. And so being an application layer and being able to choose from it, it serves only as an advantage.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yep. And that being said, that there's the third party LLMs, and we talk about this later more if you like, but the third party LLMs, they encompass so many great characteristics that we look for to be an AI data assistant to help us on that journey, that we still love using them.
I see. Okay, yeah, there are a few questions that I'd love to ask you about there. But yeah, I guess we could jump right into that. Are there any agentic type applications for Simply Put that particularly excite you? By the way, when you refer to Simply Put, do you call it a text to SQL company? Because that's what I just see as a space in general.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, simply put, also sometimes Simplyput.ai, since we're Simplyput.ai. Text-to-SQL is a large component of it. Absolutely. And you're going to see a lot of text-to-SQL solutions pop up very quickly because it's very easy now to hook up a data source to an AI and for it to quickly generate some SQL. That's not the trick here, though. The biggest thing is to make sure that it is generating trusted SQL in the sense that it understands really well the nuances of particular data sets that data teams and companies hook up um, to the AI. And that's where we come in. So we see this
Very
all the time
nuanced.
with, yeah, we see this
There's a lot
all,
of silos. Yeah, you got to know where like the semantic structures point.
you know, this very well. You know, you've worked in data yourself. We often walk around with these CTEs, these common table expressions in our heads, right? Where we know to exclude test users, we know to cast timestamps in a certain time zone, we know to exclude certain dates, et cetera, to make to make the answer work and get the answer that's actually needed
Right.
for a business
And
question.
and that could be for one data set, and then there's a whole other like standardized convention for another data set, right? With all within the same org, right? And God
Right.
forbid you have to reach out to another tables org and understand their data gotchas and
Yep.
what their data dictionary is. So yeah, I'd love to understand like how, if at all, if you could talk about how you're handling that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've taken the time over again, we feel like old hats at this point, crazily enough, even though it's only been over 2 years. We've taken the time to really understand what from our customers and from a number of different data sets that we've analyzed, et cetera, what needs to be done to tell the LLM what exactly needs the information it needs to answer the questions correctly. So to do a scanning where it understands the underlying values and it understands the data types, and we even create a data dictionary on the fly when you first hook up your data. We allow you, when the data changes, to retrain the AI to understand exactly what's going on with the underlying data.
And that,
And
is that
what
from, okay, sorry, but is that from fine tuning or is that from prompt engineering? Like when you say train?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I can get into it. Would rather not get into the exact details here, but I will say that a lot of it is using a RAG model to have the AI be able to reference sources that it needs to. And for us to set up the sources in the exact right way for the AI to be able to use them when it needs to. The other thing that we do is we are very big on augmenting data teams in order to help their business users and stakeholders to be able to answer data questions. So we very much feel that we're not replacing data teams to any degree. We're helping them to take off these ad hoc questions that get asked to them all the time, take those off their plate, to do very simple analyses for the data folks as well, to give to their stakeholders. So we also want to keep them in the loop. We have this human in the loop way of thinking about it. The data team comes in,
Yeah.
we scan data to really understand what's going on. And then we allow the data teams to impart their particular knowledge very easily in a managed way into Simplyput. So that means that they can put in specific instructions that interact directly with the prompt, and they can have a way to test that those instructions are listened to. They can verify SQL queries such that anytime a similar question is asked, it references a SQL query that the data team has put in. We allow them to also verify the charts and the explanations to come back. So everything that's there so that they feel confident that the answer is going to be trusted by the user when they ask a question. And another big component we do is we set up guardrails. So you can imagine the
So
biggest thing.
so
Oh, go
so
ahead.
one of the things is like the inaccuracy is obviously like a big issue here, and like black boxiness of text to SQL. Like I'm not going to let some AI just go run and do some calculation and then come up with this analysis that I'm going to steer my company on. So here there's a very clear kind of chain of thought where you can see that's fully visible. Is that right?
It's a great way to put it. Visible and auditable. That's the biggest thing. So for us, the biggest thing is for the data teams to be able to trust and for the end users to be able to trust as well. So the
Before we
business
move on,
teams, go ahead.
yeah. So before you move on to your next point, I do want to ask you about when you're augmenting when you said you augment the data team now and with a human in the loop. Now, does that mean that Simply Put has like a personnel that represents a certain client? Or is there like literally a human analyst on the Simply Put side, which augments that data team? And is that kind of what? Let me see. I don't know if I understood you correctly there. Can you help me out?
Yeah, for sure. So what we mean by that is when someone hooks up their data, we take care of learning about the data as much as we can. But what we want to enable as well is for anyone on a company's data team using Simply Put to be able to come in and put their knowledge in quickly. So that's what I mean is that they're able to put in their knowledge and we're augmenting their interaction with stakeholders in the sense that we are enabling them to
Yeah.
say to their stakeholder, here you go. Here's a trusted way to ask questions about the data and get the answers that you need. And then the data analysts are free to go off
Yeah.
and to work on more high level projects, to in-depth analyses, work on data pipelines, things of that nature. So
So
that's what I
this
mean.
this used to be done. I remember just running data teams, like you'd get pinged with the same question over and over, variations of the same question over from like the sales team, the marketing team, right? What's that number? What's the average cart value or whatever in Georgia, in California, or whatever, right? And they just have these little variables. And so what we used to do is basically provide a dashboard, right? With these Tableau dashboard or something like that. Now it sounds like Simply Put is substituting for that. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, to a degree. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So we feel that, look, I love a good dashboard. The dashboards at the end of the day, what the purpose that they were ultimately meant to serve was to answer users' questions, right? So a user has a question, then they go to the dashboard, use the dashboard to get the answer. We're saying now, just ask your question directly, and then you get the answer, and then you can follow up in conversation and say, okay, now I want to dive into this particular element of the results you gave me. Or, oh, I'd like you to explain how you got that answer.
And
What
this
else
is to
can I
the
ask?
AI within Simply Put. This is not a human being.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So you can actually converse with the AI, which is very powerful.
Oh, that's super neat. And all at the same time, I know accountability here is a big problem within the AI space. I feel that a lot of these AI agents, these products, they won't gain mainstream adoption quite yet, right? I feel like people are always going to need like a throat to choke, right? So this
Mhm.
seems it would still leave that analyst who built that dashboard or the AI, simply puts AI in this case, accountable. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. In the sense that they're able to see exactly what was used in order for the AI to answer users' questions. And it's very important, again, this human in the loop element for the human to say, okay, I can say that this is correct and I have a trail to actually see what's going on. So that's absolutely very important. We never want, the black box is great to a degree, but we want to make sure that the black box is as understandable as possible. And because as when you make a data driven business decision, you need to understand what's going on exactly. And you need to understand how the answer was gotten.
Yeah, it
Oh,
could sink the entire company, right? Working
right.
in the hedge fund space, right? These big trades that are made on these data decisions, like you need to make sure you're right. Um,
Yeah.
that is awesome. I do want to jump to something that you mentioned earlier, which is probably one of the bigger questions that a lot of folks are wondering. And it seems like you guys have dealt with it in a very steadfast fashion. So basically, you mentioned something about riding the wave of innovation. That's the whole positioning of Simply Put since inception.
Yep.
So it's Sam Altman. I saw him speak not too long ago. He mentioned there's startups that are going to bet against the growth of AGI, and they're doing like call it the last 10%, the last 20% of engineering on top of a third party wrapper, and those folks are going to get wiped out. because AGI, that's betting against AGI, that's betting against the growth of AI, to where eventually it'll be able to do that last 20% on its own. So specifically, I'd love to hear about how you're thinking about how you guys have been riding the wave. There are innovations such as the context window that is quite large. And so a lot of the maneuvering or engineering that you guys have to do today around prompt engineering and so forth, understanding these nuances, when the thought is that when there's a longer context window, all that engineering and all that semantic layering won't be necessary. What's your thought on that?
Great question. We love the larger context windows because it allows us to put in even more information for the AI to consider when answering questions. And I get into that a little bit. We're working with the Google team to look at Gemini 1.5 Pro actually as we speak, and that has 1 million token context window. And we're very excited about that. Currently using a number of applications within Simplyput. So I totally agree with that statement. The biggest thing for us is, again, this human in the loop aspect, right? Any company that's going to working in data, and myself and my co-founder Tony working in data, every company has a unique, their unique nuances about the data, and there's certain ways of speaking about the data, and there's a parlance, and there are company terms and things of that nature that are always going to be needed to given to the AI for it to really understand how to answer the questions correctly for each.
Just to help out the audience, can you give us a concrete example?
Yeah, for sure. So we're working with a company right now, and this is a trivial example, but imagine it's a retail company and they have revenue and units sold. And so one of the terms that they always talk about is ARU, which is average revenue per unit. Now, the AI may understand that out of the box. It may be able to interpret that, or that may be a unique term for the company. So what we need to be able to do is allow folks to be able to put in that specific knowledge and give it to the LLM so it understands when someone asks this term, then the AI understands. When I was at Atlassian, we had a bunch of terms like this. One was WAC, WAC, WAC. And that meant basically www.atlassian.com, which was different than BAT, which was blog.atlassian.com, right? The AI is never going to understand that.
In the hedge fund world, the fixed income world, that means weighted average coupon.
That's a great example, right? Because what happens is there are all these different terms, and the AI can say, okay, I think I know what this means, but it's unique everywhere. So WAC was a good example. If someone said, how many page views were there on WAC versus back? The AI would be like, I don't know what you mean. Really, what we have to do is for the AI to understand how to answer the questions to allow data people to put in that knowledge. So again, the better the AI is at being able to take that knowledge that we put in the platform and use it, the better. We're happy about that. And the bigger context windows allow us to be able to put in even more data and to not only allow SQL queries to be run, but you can imagine results can actually come back, right? And then the AI can say, I'm not just going to run a SQL query, but I'm going to use the results of the last SQL query. And now that I have a big enough context window, I can fit that in there, and then it can make insights based on that right there for the users. So the bigger the context windows, we're happy about that.
I see. So would that make Gemini your favorite model to go to right now?
I'd say we're very interested in Gemini right now, and we have a good relationship with the Google team. So we're very excited about it.
Okay, great. So yeah, hopefully, that should ease a lot of the burden away when it comes to some of the contextual understanding of all these nuances at whatever company. Now, you mentioned something about, you touched on agentic applications that you were really excited about. And one of them was, you said Simply Put has an AI that basically acts as like instead of a dashboard, it has its own AI analyst, if you will. Is that right? What other app, or is that the application that you're excited about, or if you can expand on that?
I will, yeah, definitely. So we're excited about the fact that, again, traditionally as an analyst, you go to a dashboard, or a user, you go to a dashboard, and then you have to figure out the question flow and then figure out in your own head, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to look at that. We have a way that the AI actually has suggested follow-up questions. It suggests whether it should dive deeper into a certain metric, whether it should explain what happened as well. So that aspect of leading someone analysis, I think, is very interesting and helping someone truly understand the answers that they get and what's possible to ask about the data. The other thing I think is interesting is, and this is going into maybe what you were describing as well, but we've had folks who, for example, we're working with a company that makes virtual credit cards. And so they're very interested in using us internally, using Simply Put internally for their own company, but they're also very interested in their customers being able to ask questions about data as well. So for this virtual credit card company, they want to use Simply Put, and we have an API ability for them to use and plug us into their existing product so that their customers can come in and ask how many virtual credit cards were created last
Ah,
month, just a
you
month
guys are almost
before.
like a B2B
Yeah.
to C in this case.
Yeah, it's the same sort of exercise, right? And the biggest thing, it all comes down to, can you trust the answers that the users will get? Are the guardrails there such that if they ask a question, they will understand what exactly they can ask about and they won't be led astray? And for the audit trail to be there as well for the people who are creating the solution.
That's huge. I mean, as you put it, I think the biggest nut to crack or the biggest fear point for most companies deploying AI out into the wild directly to their customer base is the guardrails, right? How do you mitigate hallucination? How do you the answers relevant to the question? How do you say how do you get the AI to tell you I don't know when but it's really going out of bounds? Because it could really have huge ramifications from a branding perspective at the minimum to any company.
Yep.
How are you can you talk a bit about how you're handling that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just us understanding exactly how to, in many ways, to prompt the AI to do that, but allow people to put in the knowledge that it's actually going to stay within those guardrails. And so it is a bit of prompt engineering, but there are many other tricks to it that are a little proprietary, which I won't get into. That is, of course, the biggest thing we're delivering for data teams, that they can say, I trust that this is going to not cost me a fortune. If it says, oh yes, I can absolutely refund you this amount or something like that. And then they're on the hook for being liable for something that the AI said. And as you mentioned, that is a big thing from a branding perspective, from a legal perspective, that needs to be solved when using AI to actually interact with customers.
Yeah, that's a major one. No, thank you for mentioning that. So is there anything else that you guys are doing, or rather, let me rephrase this point. Like you guys were first movers in the space, so you guys have that advantage for sure. You guys created these deep relationships with a lot of these companies that that you're calling for using their LLMs. Now, um, what are other areas of differentiation, right? There is one, you've got like a lot of companies that are doing this, and they're either doing this as its own company in its own, as its own product and its own. And then you've got folks like Tableau that are I get maybe it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I don't know. But certainly, like it could be thought of that, hey, these guys already have access to, they have a good go to market strategy. They have access to a lot of data teams. They understand all the nuances of each and every dashboard and silo, and they got all that positioning already down. So how do you differentiate with these big guns and the sea of other text-to-SQL applications out there?
Yeah, definitely. I think with incumbents, it's always, can we move faster and innovate faster and listen to customers quicker and be agile enough to create the solution that's needed for folks? I think that's the biggest thing there. I will say with existing dashboarding solutions, and you could put on top a layer of asking AI for sure, definitely. But we're really honed in on the management layer. And that's the biggest thing that differentiates us right now. And I also think differentiates us from our competitors, is that we've really spent the time over the past 2+ years in order to build that out and to make sure that everything is really trustable. I can't tell you how many folks we talk to who say one of our biggest hurdles actually talking to them is they've been burned a couple times. by some text to SQL solutions come to them. And so it's not until they actually hook up their data to our AI and they're like, oh, finally, this is
Oh,
this works.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
So
like you basically have one of your common customers are people that are dealing with botched jobs, huh?
yeah, exactly. Which is interesting because it's moving so quickly to space that, you know, a year and a half ago, people hadn't even thought of these kind of solutions. And then now we're finding people who have been burned by bad solutions, botched jobs, as you said. That's our biggest thing is to always focus on the trust aspect. Absolutely. I know I've said that a
With
number of
management.
times. Management
Management
is completely
is
different.
and when you
And
say well, sorry, when you say management layer, do you mean management of call it these the curated prompts or more like management of a C-suite
oh,
as a customer?
management of the for the data people to be able to put in their knowledge into our simply put, and so that the AI can quickly understand what's going on. That's what we mean. That they have an auditable system and can manage exactly what the AI knows about and can trust that it's going to answer things correctly.
I see. So basically the knowledge, the contextual knowledge that each now analyst has about their domain.
Yep. Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right. So we provide the management layer for them to be able to interact in that way. Something else I wanted to touch on that I think is a very interesting, in many ways, this is why we're excited about the larger context windows because it opens up these possibilities more and more, is to have the AI generate insights, right? So it's not just the text to SQL, but it's actually understanding the underlying data and pointing out anomalies, trends, even doing forecasts, things of that nature. This will all still be within the control of the data team, that they will say, here's what I want, here are the anomalies and trends I want you to look at. And here are some aspects you should know while you're doing this analysis. But that is a huge thing. You can imagine these reports that you and I have done a million
Yeah.
times every Friday, you report, and you have to say what changed week to week.
Right.
All of a sudden, you have this and you can generate that report automatically. Maybe you can edit it a little bit as need be, but that takes a big part of the reporting layer off your plate as well. So again, you're free to go do more in-depth analyses and work on more strategic projects, which as a data person, that's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to be able to do those, not have to do as much reporting and ad hoc questions, answering ad hoc questions. So
Amen to that. Yeah. This kind of opens up your analyst to start looking at, like, for example, like anomalies, right? Which kind of require a lot of hand inspection, right? Is it noise or mismeasurement? And you're saying that given the current advent of AI, we don't have to sit there and operate with this like point and click code type interface anymore. It's
yeah,
more like show me all like the anomalies, maybe given like a certain linear algorithm or something of the sort, right? Using residuals or whatever technique. But the point is that you have this sub analyst that you could do your kind of the heavy lifting or the grunt work rather of performing the analysis for you instead of like this point and click type interface. Is that right?
yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think what especially is interesting is comparing time periods, right? So again, last week, these were the results. What's different this week? Because that's what people always want to know, right? What changed and what do I need to act on? And what do you recommend I do? So I think like getting into that's where we're really moving. And we built a lot of that into our product today. And we're building even more. That's what I'm most excited about on our roadmap is diving into not just text to SQL, being able to quickly interact with database and get the answer, but then to really dive deep into insights and recommendations.
I see. Okay. So if I could sum up, just say somebody asks you, what about Tableau or the other sea of Texas SQL startups? It sounds like you guys are really focused on the management layer, right? Of contextual understanding from the analyst so far that it sets you miles apart from the incumbents in the space, which is Tableau. And then not only that, but like the agentic application, right? So going away from this classic GUI icon click interface to something that's a bit more natural in terms of communicating or interacting with its user, which is the data analyst, right?
Yep.
Does that sound about right?
Yep. Very well put. Simply put. Yep.
Yeah. I have to say that customer story where the B2B2C story is quite exciting, and I did not expect that out of you guys. Not in terms of capability, but in terms of just going that length to build out a customer's product for them. Because that's yeah, I can't see too many tech to SQL companies acting as guardrails as well that are good enough to be externally facing. Usually, you need a separate company to go in and act as a guard. There are separate companies that act as guardrails, so
Right.
that's pretty darn awesome.
Yeah. No, we're very excited as well. I think it's a testament to how well things work internally that they say, oh, can we do this externally as well for our customers? Yeah. Very excited about that.
As we wrap up here, is there any advice that you'd have for young entrepreneurs? Like obviously you've saw a lot of failure and then you've seen a lot of success with Simply Put. I'm super happy about that.
Thanks.
And yeah, any advice that you can give to young entrepreneurs or people that are aspiring to become one?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you have to go into it eyes wide open that it is going to be a ton of work. And I love it. I love the work. They're going to be ups and downs, but you have to enjoy the ride. I think anyone will say that. And then persistence is the biggest thing, persistence and really believing in your vision, but also being able to quickly change your vantage point on anecdotes that come in, insights you can quickly make. I think, again, we're data people, which is we love to have big data sets from which we can draw some conclusions and trends. But when you're such a small company, again, part of your advantage is that you can quickly maneuver, right? And say, oh, that's a very interesting idea. What if we did it that way? Right. And so to be persistent in your vision, just in general, and then to be agile and move fast. So, and most people say move fast, but it is true. It's very true.
Yeah, cool, man. Thing I will say, and this is just from my personal experience, like in consulting, is that I really like how you guys have navigated the space in a variety of ways. The Simply Put story where you're dealing with all these nuances of different companies, it's very reminiscent of churn modeling. You remember modeling churn ever?
Oh yeah. Not a lot of churn.
Yeah, and so what I found as a consultancy is that you can't replicate that template, or it was very difficult to replicate the same template everywhere else to where you could productize a churn model, right? Because everyone was so bespoke, right? And there was so many nuances to the data, how they thought of churn, etc. But it sounds like you guys have found a way to basically, and there was a graveyard of these productized churn modeling companies. But it
Yep.
sounds like you guys found a way to create that layer of abstraction higher to where you have a generalizable model amongst all these different businesses.
Yeah. That's very well put. Yeah. That's exactly the way we think about it. And we want to empower the data teams to be able to do those things. And again, we take care of a lot of the AI understanding the nuances of the data, but then there's always going to be this layer for every single company where they need to put in their specific knowledge, and we want to enable that and empower data teams to be able to do that, so that business users can truly self-serve. That's our biggest thing.
Cool, man. Hats off to you guys. Thanks for including me on the part of the ride. And yeah, definitely stay in touch.
Cool. Thanks, AJ.
Take care.